Removing and replacing parts. HP EliteDesk 800 G5 Tower. How to replace the access panel.
Removal. Slide the access panel latch left to the unlocked position. Grasp the handle on the rear of the access panel and slide it back. Lift and remove the panel from the unit. Replacement. Ensuring the tabs on the access panel are aligned with the slots in the chassis, lower the panel onto the chassis. Slide the access panel forward until the latch snaps into place.
How to replace the optical drive.
To remove the optical drive, first remove the access panel. Detach the power and data cables from the rear of the optical drive. Press on the green drive release latch at the rear of the drive and slide the drive out the front of the unit. If you are installing a new optical drive, pull the green drive release latch off of the optical drive. Insert a straightened paper clip or other similar tool into the force eject hole on the optical drive to eject the drive tray. Pry and push out on the tabs securing the bezel to the optical drive and remove the bezel from the drive. The optical drive bezel has several tabs that fit into slots on the front of the optical drive. To install a new optical drive, press the old optical drive bezel onto the optical drive until the tabs are secured. There are two small pins on the green drive release latch that fit into small holes on the side of the optical drive. Press the pins into their holes to secure the latch to the new optical drive. Slide the drive into its drive bay through the front of the PC until the green release latch snaps into place. Replace the power and data cables to the rear of the drive.
How to replace the main bezel, dust filter bezel.
To remove the main bezel or the dust filter bezel, first remove the access panel. Unlatch the three side tabs of the main bezel and rotate the bezel away from the PC. Some units will have a dust filter bezel attached to the main bezel. To replace the main bezel or the dust filter bezel in these units, pry the two bezels apart until they separate. If installing a new dust filter bezel, press and snap the dust filter bezel onto the main bezel until all edges of the bezels are flush. The main bezel has three hooked tabs on the right side and three tabs with cutouts on the left side, which fit over tabs and over alignment posts on the chassis. To replace the main bezel, align the hooked tabs on the right side of the bezel over their tabs, then rotate and press the left side of the bezel until the cutout tabs snap over their posts.
How to replace the hard drive cage, 3.5-inch hard drive.
Before you begin, remove the access panel. front bezel. Rotate the hard drive cage up. Removal. Disconnect the power and data cables from the rear of the drive in the cage. Press the release tab on the side of the drive cage. Grasp the hard drive and slide it up and out of the drive cage. Remove the power and data cables from the clips on the drive cage. Remove the two Torx T15 screws securing the drive cage to the chassis. Slightly flex the side of the chassis and tilt the drive cage forward to disengage the white clips from the chassis. Lift and remove the drive cage. Replacement. Lower the drive cage into position, aligning the pins on the drive cage with the slots on the chassis. Ensure the white clips are fully slid forward and in the correct position. While flexing the side of the chassis out, rotate the drive cage forward until the white clips are aligned with the screw holes. Replace the two Torx T15 screws securing the drive cage to the chassis. Replace the power and data cables into the clips on the drive cage. Align the guide pegs on the hard drive with the channels in the drive cage and lower the drive down until it snaps into place. Reconnect the power and data cables to the rear of the drive.
How to replace the expansion cards.
To remove an expansion card if present in the unit, first remove the access panel. Remove any external connectors from the expansion card, such as wireless antennas. Detach any internal connectors to other system components. Lift the latch for the expansion card's retaining bracket and swing the bracket out. Press down on the latch for the PCI x16 slot on the motherboard if removing a card from the PCI x16 slot. Carefully pull out the expansion card. To replace an expansion card, carefully align and push the card into its slot on the motherboard until it is fully seated. Rotate the expansion card's retaining bracket back into place to secure the card. Attach any internal connectors necessary to other system components. Attach any external connectors if necessary, such as external wireless antennas.
How to replace the system memory.
To replace system memory, first remove the access panel. It may also be easier to access the memory by detaching the connectors from the optical drive. Simultaneously push down on the clips on either side of the DDR4 DIMM socket to release the memory module. Carefully pull out the memory module. There is one notch on the bottom of every DDR4 DIMM module, offset from the center, that fits over a tab in the DDR4 DIMM memory socket. When installing DDR4 DIMMs, align the notch on the module with the tab in the socket. Press the module into the socket until the clips on both sides of the socket lock into place. Replace the connectors to the rear of the optical drive if they were removed for access to the memory.
How to replace the PS2 and serial port module.
To remove a PS2 and serial port module if present in the unit, first remove the access panel. Lift the latch for the expansion card's retaining bracket and swing the bracket out. Detach the connector for the PS2 and serial port module from the motherboard. Carefully remove the module from the unit. To replace a PS2 and serial port module, align the back slot edge of the adapter into its position at the rear of the unit. Reattach the connector to the motherboard. Rotate the expansion card's retaining bracket back into place to secure the adapter.
How to replace the solenoid lock assembly.
To remove the solenoid lock assembly, first remove the access panel. Disconnect the solenoid lock connector from the motherboard. Detach the two Torx 15 security screws that secure the solenoid lock assembly to the rear of the unit. Note you will need a screw bit with a hollow tip to remove the security screws. Remove the solenoid lock assembly from the unit. There is a small guide on the rear of the PC that an edge of the solenoid lock rests on. To replace the solenoid lock assembly, place the assembly against the rear inside wall of the chassis, aligning the edge of the lock onto its guide. Replace the two Torx 15 security screws to secure the lock to the unit. Reconnect the solenoid lock connector to the motherboard.
How to replace the system fan.
To replace the system fan, first remove the access panel. Next, detach the fan connector to the motherboard. Remove the 3 Phillips No. 2 screws that attach the fan to the rear of the PC. Keep your hand on the fan as you remove the last screw to keep it from falling. Then pull the fan out of the PC. There is a hole on the bottom inside corner of the system fan that aligns over a small post on the rear of the PC. To replace the system fan, align the fan so it is blowing outward. The label on the fan should be facing out of the system. The connector should be on the inside chassis wall side of the unit. Align the hole of the fan over its screw post and align the screws of the fan with the screw holes at the rear of the PC. Secure the fan to the rear of the PC with its 3 Phillips No. 2 screws. Make sure the hood sensor cable is not trapped by the fan against the rear wall of the PC. Reattach the fan connector to the motherboard.
How to replace the option board DisplayPort module.
To replace the DisplayPort module if installed on the motherboard, first remove the access panel and the system fan. Detach the 2 Phillips No. 1 screws securing the module to the motherboard. Pull the module off of the motherboard and out of the unit. There is a connector on the DisplayPort module that fits into a connector on the motherboard. To replace the module, press the connector edge of the DisplayPort module onto the motherboard connector. Secure the DisplayPort module to the motherboard with its 2 Phillips No. 1 screws.
How to replace the hood sensor.
To remove the hood sensor, first remove the access panel. Disconnect the hood sensor connector from the motherboard. Slide the hood sensor out of its cutout on the rear edge of the PC and remove it from the unit. The top edges of the hood sensor slide over a cutout on the rear of the PC. To replace the hood sensor, slide the hood sensor edges over the cutout until secure. Reattach the hood sensor connector to the motherboard.
How to replace the power supply.
Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and rotate the hard drive cage up. Removal. Disconnect all the power cables from the motherboard. Remove the power cables from the guide clip on the chassis. Remove the 3 Torx T15 screws that secure the power supply to the chassis. Press the latch on the inside edge of the power supply and slide it away from the chassis wall. Lift and remove the power supply from the chassis. Replacement. Lower the power supply into the chassis and slide it back until it locks into place. Replace the 3 Torx T15 screws that secure the power supply to the chassis. Replace the power cables into the guide clip on the chassis. Reconnect all the power cables to the motherboard.
How to replace the speaker.
Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and rotate the hard drive cage up. Removal. Disconnect the speaker cable from the motherboard. Remove the Torx T15 screw that secures the speaker to the front of the chassis. Slide the speaker to the side and remove it from the unit. Replacement. Lower the speaker into the chassis, aligning it with the tabs on the chassis wall. Slide the speaker over until it fits under its guides. Replace the Torx T15 screw that secures the speaker to the front of the chassis. Reconnect the speaker cable to the motherboard.
How to replace the heatsink.
To remove the heatsink, first remove the access panel. Detach the heatsink connector to the motherboard. Loosen the 4 captured Torx 15 screws for the heatsink and gently pull the heatsink out of the PC. Before replacing the heatsink into the system, first clean off the old thermal grease from the microprocessor. Clean the grease from the heatsink if you are replacing the same heatsink into the system. Apply new thermal grease or a thermal pad to the microprocessor. Align the 4 screws of the heatsink over the 4 screw holes on the motherboard. Tighten the 4 Torx 15 heatsink screws. Replace the heatsink connector to the motherboard.
How to replace the CPU.
To remove the CPU, first remove the access panel and the heatsink. Press down to release the CPU load lever from its retention tab, and pull the load lever and load plate away from the socket. Identify pin 1 on the socket by the mark on the corner of the socket stencil. Line up the pin 1 corner of the Intel CPU removal replacement tool over the socket. Press down on the plunger of the removal tool to pick up the CPU from the socket and remove the tool and the CPU from the motherboard. To replace the CPU, first identify pin 1 position on the microprocessor by noting the yellow mark on the corner of the chip assembly. Make sure the Intel CPU staging tool side pins are set to the correct socket type for the CPU. For this unit, it is LGA1151. Place the CPU into the Intel CPU staging tool. When correctly inserted, the small notches on the side of the CPU should align over the side pins on the staging tool. Place the removal replacement tool over the stage, lining up the pin 1 triangles on each tool. Press down on the removal replacement tool to pick the CPU up from the stage. Align the removal replacement tool again to pin 1 on the motherboard CPU socket. Press the plunger on the removal replacement tool to release the CPU into the socket. Swing the load plate down. Lock the load lever under its retaining tab to secure the microprocessor into place.
How to replace the wireless LAN board.
Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and rotate the hard drive cage up. Removal. Caution: Use care when disconnecting the wireless LAN antenna cables from the wireless LAN board. A damaged cable or connector can degrade performance. Disconnect the antenna cable from the wireless LAN board with a pair of small needle nose pliers or tweezers. Remove the Phillips No. 1 screw that secures the card to the system board and allow it to release to the spring tension position. Grasp the card by the edges and pull gently to remove it. Replacement. Match the notch on the card with the key in the socket and gently push the card into place. Press the card down and replace the Phillips No. 1 screw that secures the card to the system board. Reconnect the antenna connectors to the wireless LAN board. The antenna connectors are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the wireless LAN board. Caution: use care when connecting the wireless LAN antenna cables to the wireless LAN board. A damaged cable or connector can degrade performance.
How to replace the single serial port module.
To remove the single serial port riser module, if installed in the unit, first remove the access panel. Detach the serial port connector to the motherboard. Detach the 2 hex nuts on the rear of the chassis for the serial port module using a 3/16 hex socket driver. Pull the single serial port module out of the unit. To replace the single serial port module, align the serial port into its cutout at the rear of the unit. Secure the serial port module to the chassis with its 2 hex nuts. Replace the serial port module connector to the motherboard.
How to restore CMOS to factory settings.
Before you begin, CMOS factory settings should be restored as a first step before replacing the system motherboard. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and rotate the drive cage up. Steps: remove the battery from the motherboard. Wait 30 seconds. Replace the battery to the motherboard. CMOS factory settings are now reset. Note that you will need to enter system BIOS and reset the clock in BIOS after this procedure.
How to replace the motherboard.
Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, rotate the drive cage out, graphics and expansion cards if installed, serial port module, fan, solenoid lock if installed, memory, wireless LAN module, M.2 solid-state drive, heatsink, and DisplayPort module. Removal. Disconnect all cables connected to the motherboard, noting their place for reinstallation. Remove the 10 Torx T15 screws that secure the motherboard to the chassis. Tilt the front edge of the motherboard up and slide the board towards the front of the unit. Lift and remove the motherboard out from the chassis. Replacement. At an angle, lower the system board into the chassis. Slide the system board back and align the rear I/O panel with the cutouts in the chassis. Lower the system board into place, ensuring the screw holes are aligned. Replace the 10 Torx T15 screws to secure the motherboard to the chassis. Reconnect all cables to the motherboard.
How to replace the wireless LAN antennas.
Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and rotate the hard drive cage up. Removal. Caution: use care when disconnecting the wireless LAN antenna cables from the wireless LAN board. A damaged cable or connector can degrade performance. Disconnect the antenna cable from the wireless LAN board with a pair of small needle nose pliers or tweezers. Pull the rear antenna cable out through the channel under the motherboard. Remove the rear antenna cable from the guide clips on the chassis. Press the release tab on the rear antenna cover and rotate the cover off of the chassis. Remove the Torx T15 screw that secures the rear wireless LAN antenna to the chassis. Lift and remove the rear antenna, guiding the cable through the hole in the chassis. Repeat steps 3, 5, and 6 to remove the front antenna. Replacement. Guide the rear antenna cable through the hole in the chassis. Replace the rear antenna onto the chassis, ensuring the guide pin is aligned with the cutout in the antenna. Replace the Torx T15 screw that secures the rear wireless LAN antenna to the chassis. Align the tabs on the rear antenna cover with the holes in the chassis and rotate the cover against the chassis until it snaps into place. Replace the rear antenna cable into the guide clips on the chassis. Guide the rear antenna cable through the channel under the motherboard. Repeat steps 1 through 5 to replace the front antenna. Reconnect the antenna connectors to the wireless LAN board. The antenna connectors are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the wireless LAN board. Caution: use care when connecting the wireless LAN antenna cables to the wireless LAN board. A damaged cable or connector can degrade performance.
Click the Playlists tab in YouTube to find HP videos in other languages, and search our channel to find official HP support videos.